Yeah, it's another day. It's another day in the fitness world where social media is over inundated with, nay, hundreds of thousands, probably even millions of influencer trainers and people who probably shouldn't be trainers because they don't know what they're talking about. And once again, the internet does not disappoint in this regard because there will forever be a following, a horde of people that will take some information, not think, and add their own thoughts and imagination in the world of imagination and saying, this is how it works. And we're going to totally ignore what muscles are actually being used, and we're going to tell you to do things that takes tension off of the muscles that you're trying to work for hypertrophy and strength. And it just, yeah, it's and we're gonna talk about this. So rest at the top of the overhead press. For those of you who don't know, the overhead press is in this position here where you're using either a barbell or you can end up using dumbbells. And what you end up doing is pressing up. Now, the first thing we need to look at is what muscles are being exercised in an overhead military press or an overhead press, and that's what we're going to look at here. The overhead press muscles worked are primarily going to be your front delts. It is an isolation exercise, but you need secondary muscles to get that weight up. And part of those muscles is going to include the triceps, and you're going to work a little bit of upper chest, but if you're in pretty much an upright position as you do that military press, you're going to work mostly the front delts. Now, you can get to the point of where it is so much weight that, let's see if I can get back to my thing here. You can use so much weight where you're putting too much tricep and you're working too much back. So, in other words, it's too heavy to get an effective contraction of the delts of what you're trying to push. So that's the main thing. Is this is an exercise for your front delts. Again, because you're pushing up, and what you're doing as you bring this up, these muscle fibers are coming together, and that's the contraction. In other words, they're spread out, and then as they contract, they're pulling in, and that is what's coming in focus right here. So, so basically, the primary muscle that you're working is going to be the front delts. Of course, you're going to be using the tricep because as you're pushing up, but the concentration the contraction is going to be on that front delt. Upper chest, there's a little bit there, but that's probably a third. That doesn't even come into play. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look here at this lady who's on Instagram, Stronger by the Day app, and she says, our number one tip for overhead press. And I'm not going to play the music. And it says, pause at the top, not at the bottom. You'll feel stronger and lift heavier. And that's their number one tip. It's for the overhead press is to pause at the top. Now, this is an example of exactly what I've been talking about, of people that don't know what they're talking about. And let me see if we can get back here. Let's just move this over, and we'll kind of make me a little bit bigger here. So what we want to look at in this regard is the overhead press. We're trying to isolate the front delts as we do that pressing moment. Now, she says that the number one tip is to pause at the top. Now, notice how she has her arms. Everything is stacked. The weight is stacked upon her joints. So what that is doing is showing is that here, we've got the weight, we've got her wrist, we've got her elbows, we've got her shoulders. Everything is locked out and in line with the spine. I mean, great, looks great if we're looking for lines, but we're not, because once you stack the weight in such a manner, what you're doing is the weight is being supported by the skeletal structure and the stacking of those joints. So whenever you stack a weight in this manner where the joints are in line, your skeletal system is supporting the weight as you pause. So yeah, it's taking tension off of those front delts. It's just it just boggles the imagination, because if you go up here, I can lock out and I can pause. She says that what you need to do is breathe, and then you go down, and then you go up, and then you pause, and then you go down, and you don't pause at the bottom. Oh my gosh, she says this in some of the comments, and it's like, oh, you don't pause at the bottom, like you do with squats, and it's like you pause at the top so you can breathe, and it's like, that is the exact opposite. If you study a thing called long length partials, or you look at papers and studies that have been done on strength on hypertrophy, you'll see that one of the things that comes into play is the stretching of that muscle group to be able to get more muscle activation, get more muscle tears, so the body responds and repairs and builds more muscle fibers. Now, in a weighted stretch, what you're wanting to do is, as you come down, you want that weight to stretch that deltoid, so it's kind of like pulling apart this way. So that way you can get more activation, you'll have more micro muscle tears, and then as you pause, you get more of a weighted stretch, which studies have shown will produce more hypertrophy. And you can also get more strength gains with this. In the bottom position of the stretch, when I go up here, I can hold the weight up here, and I can actually, my front delt can actually be kind of loose. Okay, so what is really activating is the weight, or what is not activating is the weight, because it's resting upon the skeletal structure. And here's my comment here. It says, another clueless tip. The problem with pausing at the top is the weight is stacked in line with the shoulders, elbows, and wrists. In other words, the weight is resting on the skeletal structure, which means that tension is removed from the muscle group that you're working. She needs to study up on weighted stretching and long length partials to really maximize gains, hypertrophy, and or strength. Look into changing the tempo of the exercise. Have a 1 second eccentric, 1 to 2 second contraction at the peak without stacking the weight, because you want tension to remain onto that muscle group, and then have a slow 4 to 6 second negative. And in another comment, she compares, overhead press to squats, and it's ignorance in its finest. Again, this just goes to show, and she says in a comment, well, at squats, unless you pause at the bottom, this is the same thing except you're pausing at the top. No, it's not the same, because in the bottom of the squat, you are stretching those muscles, okay? They're being fully stretched in that manner. When I am up in this position here, there's a contraction and the muscles are not stretched. The stretch position for that is down in this position here. Now, I also find it odd that her being an instructor, fitness influencer, or whatever she is, giving this number one top tip for overhead press, is that she doesn't talk about the contraction. Which is very problematic. And another danger that we see, not a danger, but it's wrong to stack the weights, because again, you're taking tension off of that front delt. So when I'm up in this position here, what I'm doing is resting, and what I should be doing is keeping tension. Now, to keep tension, what I would do is have the weights up here, but it's not fully locked out. So I'm going to be bent a little bit so I can still keep that tension, and then I squeeze for 1 to 2 seconds. You can actually feel the contraction on that front delt. And then as you do that 4 to 6 second negative, you keep that contraction on that front delt. And then as you get down here, you're getting that weighted stretch on that front delt, and that is going to activate more muscle fibers. More tension, you're going to get better results in quicker amount of time than pausing at the top. It is just basically the skeletal structure when you stack the weights is a rest position. It's just ignorance at its finest. I just seeing stuff like this of saying, hey, you'll feel stronger and lift heavier by resting at the top and locking it out. Breathe. She goes up, locks it, breathe. Breathing is totally different. So as you exhale, you're bringing the weight up, and then as you go back down, you do the stretch, and you could probably even do a 1 to 2 second stretch. And then as you go back up and extend, you're pushing back out. So what she is actually doing is telling you to do the exact opposite of what you should be doing. And again, this just goes to the point to show you that, the market is over inundated with fitness influencers and personal trainers because now anybody, I mean, it's so easy to get your certified personal fitness certification. You just have to go over some information. Of course, you have to pay some money. And then some of them, oh, you got to get a 70% on the exam. You can retake the test 2, 3, 4 times or whatever, depending on, the level of the certification that you're going for. But if you want to be a fitness influencer or certified personal trainer, you just need to pass a test. And just because you pass a test doesn't mean you're going to retain that information or bring it to light in your practice of training other people or training clients. And this is a prime example. The number one tip is not a number one tip because you're stacking the weights. You're not talking about contracting the front delt at the peak and keeping tension on it by not fully locking out. And then the other thing is she's got the breathing all ass backwards. So, it's just, I just don't get it. And the thing that amazes me, it's got 464 likes in 2 days. That is just so problematic. You pause, and this is similar to a squat. You wouldn't pause at the bottom of the squat unless it was pause squats. Pause squats? But now we're making up terms? No. You would take your breath and prepare for the next rep at the top. The same goes for the overhead press. So she doesn't even know how to breathe to do an exercise. As you're coming down, you're getting ready, and then you exhale as you go up, or you're exerting force and contracting those muscles. And again, and people, this tip is so helpful. It's just absolutely crazy on what we end up seeing. So, with that being said, again, the interwebs does not disappoint when it comes to bad information. And the number one tip, and to make you feel stronger and lift heavier. That's not how that works. And if you're trying to get stronger, that's a whole nother video. That's a whole nother bunch of information of training with progressive overload with an optimal amount of sets and reps that are geared towards gaining strength. So in other words, you could do military overhead press and do it in the range of hypertrophy for sets and reps, and you're not going to get as much strength as, she says. So, it's the problem with everybody getting on board and being a certified personal, fitness influencer. All it does is just vomit up stuff, and it's just, it's kind of like a squat. No, it's not kind of like a squat. It is a totally different exercise. Totally different as far as the tension, the movement, the whole 9 yards. It's just the number one tip. Pause at the top, not the bottom. Forget about stretching the muscles out. Don't even talk about contraction of the delts, the front delt, and do not stack because you're removing tension off the muscle that you're trying to isolate and build, whether it's for strength and or hypertrophy. Yeah, it's the blind leading the blind, and the 464 people are liking this because they don't know basic human anatomy, that they don't know how the muscles work, how they don't know, they don't even know how the muscle fibers are running in the muscle that's being exercised. Because if they did, well, no, I can't even say that. I was going to say if they did know, they would know that this isn't a number one tip, but there's probably idiots out there that do know the muscle fibers and how they run, but are still clueless nonetheless. And that's why they liked this video 464 times. It's just, time under tension, volume, progressive overload. If you're going to get more muscle activation by not pausing and taking that weight off of the muscle group when you stack it. This just gets me. That just gets up my nose when I see stuff like this. And people that are making up shit and don't even know how to breathe during an exercise. And it's interesting because if you look, it's the same thing like when you do a bench press. It's not the same thing, but as far as in regards to breathing, when you go down, you inhale, and then as you push out, you exhale, and then you focus on the contraction of the pecs, depending on the line of movement, on what area, and of course, if you're on a flat bench or an incline. But basic breathing during an exercise is just, breathing at the top, those small breaths. What you're doing is you're limiting the amount of oxygen that you can see is what she's doing. You look at that, breathe in, hold it, push it. It's not good. What you're doing is limiting the amount of oxygen that can get in your body. And of course, oh, good Lord, seriously? The more I think about it, the more that I see that is wrong with this video and the claims that this is the number one tip for the overhead press. So, we're not gonna beat this dead horse anymore because it is so painfully obvious that she is clueless, and so are numerous other, fitness influencers and people who are selling their magic routines, making fantastical claims that theirs is better, faster, cheaper, whatever, in minimal amount of time, you get the maximum results. No, it takes time. It takes time and energy. It takes know-how. And that's, there used to be a time when certified personal trainers knew how to do the exercise. They would know how to breathe, and they actually studied and said, okay, well, this is what you do, and the oxygen absorption in the body, that as you expel, you want to get it's all tied together, folks. But what we're seeing today is people that are just making up stuff out of their own mind. It's like, welcome to the land of imagination with magic hands, and whatever I say, because I'm a woman, and because I'm on social media, and because I have all these pictures and I make all these claims, even though they fly in the face of established facts, you'll still have the hordes of idiots that will like videos like this. And, it's the blind leading the blind. And unfortunately, instead of training people with good and verifiable facts and information, now we get stuff like that. Now we get stuff where, it's like you're just making this stuff up. And what bothers me is that if she hasn't been taught the right things to begin with, she's an instructor. What about the organization? But I have a problem with that because the organization she got certified with teaches good information. She just chooses to ignore it. So, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do to help stupid people. If they don't want to change their ways, if they want to remain ignorant, if they want to make stuff up, and it's all, and what I see mostly in stuff like this is because people, they need to be relevant. They need to have constant content put out onto social media so they can get clients, so they can sell their little routine. And facts be damned. Let's screw what's, number one tip. What could be a number one tip? Oh, I think a number one tip is that we'll stack the weights and then I'll breathe. It doesn't make sense. It's absolutely insane. And so we're just throwing facts out into the wind. Who cares? Facts be damned. I just need to be relevant. I need to have content. And facts are going to be the victim of this, unfortunately. Because really, when you get down to it, there's basic information and facts, and evidence shows that these things work, and here's how you do it. And it's really simple. But when things are really simple, that means that you're limited in the amount of content that you can do. You can only do an overhead press so many times with the same basic information. So to stand out from the crowd, now these people have to make up shit. This is how you do it. And then, of course, you have the clueless, ignorant people that come on board and say, I wish I had a physique like hers. And, great job, blah, 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 without knowing anything about the topic. And they're slamming that like button. And it's like, that's not how it works. So I'm just amazed at, the lack of information, pausing at the top, stacking the weights, look at that, holding her breath, breathing in and out, hold it, breathe out, then breathe in at the top. That's not how you do it. Talk about limiting the amount of oxygen getting into your muscles in your body when it needs it the most during exercise. No, let's limit the amount. That sounds like a great idea, said no one ever who actually knew what they were talking about. So anyway, yeah, that's what we got going on today. That is what got up my nose so far, and I think I'm going to take a break from social media for a little bit, at least until tomorrow, and we'll see what happens. So, with that being said, what are some of the craziest and most ignorant, stupid things that you've seen by fitness influencers in social media? Put that in the comment section down below. Oh, and by the way, over here on the Varied Life on YouTube, like, subscribe, appreciate that. I'm not even a partner. I'm not making money off of this, but I would appreciate the like. Just based on the fact that I'm using facts and not making shit up. So that ought to be at least worth, a like or two. So, yeah, put that information down in the comments. Let me know what you think. What is the stupidest fitness information that you have seen on social media? And maybe I'll do another video and we'll highlight all of those stupid things that you, the viewers, have seen. And I don't know, we'll take it from there. All right, that's going to be it. We'll see you on the next video. Peace. Oh,